Yep.
And speaking of Donald Trump, we mentioned Iran earlier. We mentioned the fact that Scott Morrison had voiced a strong support for Donald Trump's tougher approach to Iran. I'm delighted to welcome back to Outsiders. He's been on before. He was a big hit with you all and with us. That's Mike Doran. He used to work for George Bush, and he's got lots of insights into what's going on in Washington. He's now at the Hudson Institute, except he's not. He's actually right here talking to us on the screen. Mike Doran, how are you, mate?
Great to be here.
Good to see you again. Now, look, let's kick straight into Iran. You've written a couple of good articles recently on what's been happening. We had Donald Trump. There was going to be there was a drone shot down. There was the potential that he would retaliate. Then he didn't. He said he didn't want to kill any people. Mike, talk us through first what has happened and then your thoughts on where we're going.
So the Iranians have a new pressure campaign that has two components to it. Part of it is non-compliance with the nuclear deal's restrictions on the nuclear program. On a few areas, like the caps on stockpiles, they have announced that they're not going to respect them anymore. That's component one. And then component two is these kind of gray zone attacks, so-called gray zone attacks, where they're sabotaging tankers, downing drones, attacking pipelines, and so on. And the goal is to put pressure. This is not what they state, but I mean, you can see the goal is to put pressure on the international community in the hopes that especially the Europeans will then put pressure on Trump to give them some relief. The question is, what kind of relief do they want? And thank you for mentioning the article that I wrote. I argue there that at this stage, they're not really looking for economic relief. They love economic relief. They're under crushing sanctions. But they figure that a Democrat may win in 2020, and a Democrat would go, would go back to the JCPOA and give them back all of the benefits that they had, so they could get everything that they want, complete relief from sanctions under a Democratic successor to Trump, without making any concessions. So they're not going to negotiate with Trump seriously about that now. What they really want is to make sure that they don't lose any of their nuclear programs. Back in early May, Mike Pompeo, the Secretary of State, he revoked two waivers that allow international partners to cooperate with Iran on their nuclear program. And that scared them because there are 5 other waivers. There are 7 in total that the United States is using to support these international partnerships. And the Iranians don't want to lose those because it gives them legitimacy and allies and so on.
James?
So with the American pressure campaign against Iran, now I've read that this is costing them around $120 million per day, the sanctions, their inability to sell oil. At what point does that start to bite so hard on the mullahs, because the country itself will start to demand change because there's just simply not food, there's not, the economy grinds to a halt. And what did you think of Trump's decision, the report that he decided to call back that potential military strike after that drone was taken out by the Iranians?
I'll take the second question first. When I first heard about it, I was a little bit disappointed because I was fearing that maybe we were looking weak. But then I quickly shifted my feelings because I think that the Iranians were setting a trap for him at the G20. I mean, they wanted to create a sense. The game the Iranians are playing is that they want to create a sense of chaos in the world, or potential chaos, war, disruption of economic markets, and so on. And they want to be arsonist and fireman at the same time. They want to say Trump is causing this war, and the solution is to go back to the JCPOA. And that line has a lot of resonance among the Europeans, especially because they're blaming Trump for this tension with Iran. So I think that by dodging that, he assured for himself a kind of calmer G20. Plus, he's showing the Iranians that, look, they're not going to goad him into war.
Now, Mike, you mentioned the G20 and the fact that the Europeans have been pushing to stay with Obama's nuclear deal, and Trump's been kind of out there on a limb on his own. We were delighted that our Prime Minister, Scott Morrison, at the G20, he's only recently been, elected in his own right, he came out and said he supported Donald Trump's tougher stance against the Iranians. Now, this was a big change from Canberra. Canberra's been kowtowing to the Europeans wherever they possibly can. So Morrison's gone out on a limb. The swamp back in Canberra would be having conniptions this morning, running around going, what's happening, what's happening? Tell us your thoughts on it.
I think it's fantastic. I think it's great for the United States. I think it's great for Australia. I hope he goes further. I hope he reverses some of the positions that the government has taken. You know, I hope that he joins the United States in renouncing the JCPOA. I hope he designates Hezbollah as well. But I think there's a bigger thing here. You know, when I worked in the White House under George W. Bush, I discovered over time that there's no good ideas that come out of the White House that didn't originate somewhere else. They sort of percolate up from elsewhere, and there are sort of key interlocutors that the United States has that help it think about the world. And I think now with Britain has kind of dropped out. There's sort of an empty seat there.
Yep.
Britain used to be the power that the United States talked to about what to do. And because of Brexit and other factors, Britain's just not there anymore. And I think Australia can fill that seat. I think that this might sound a little bit fanciful, but it's not. I think Australia can be a kind of trusted interlocutor about global strategy. And I think that's the way the Australians should be thinking about it. They can have an outsized influence on China policy, on American positioning globally. It's something to think about.
I'm glad you mentioned an outsider's influence, because obviously Scott Morrison watches our program, Mike, and he'll be listening to you very closely today and picking up on that. But listen, just very quickly, when you were last on, we talked a lot about the deal of the century. This is Trump's idea for the Middle East and how to solve the so-called Arab-Israeli situation. We're kind of getting closer to it. It seems to keep drifting away. You've actually been pretty close to the deal. You've had a little peek under the sheets and seen bits of the deal. Where are we now?
Well, they were going to announce it by now, but then the confusion in Israeli domestic politics meant that they have delayed it now even further till November. So all we've seen is the economic side. But we can start to get a kind of sense of the contours of things. And I think what they're doing is they're moving us. It seems to me. I mean, I don't know this for a fact. They're moving us away from the kind of land for peace idea that used to dominate American diplomacy, and sort of just accepting the fact that what we've got now is going to be in place for a long time. When I may say what we've got now, which is a kind of autonomous Palestinian area with Israel dominant. We're probably not going to have a two-state solution anytime soon. I think anybody with a brain can see that the two-state solution is really very far away. And so the question is, how do we come up with something that's acceptable to us morally, economically, and diplomatically, that can last, over the long term? And I think that's the key question.
I just want to ask you quickly about how you see the trade war with China. Trump made some fairly strong remarks about China going down the tubes. How do you see that playing out?
Well, I'm glad to see that they're going back to the negotiating table. I was very struck when I was in Australia, when I was on your show, to learn about the role. Here's an example of Australia leading the way. Australia led the way on Huawei and on on getting tough on China. And I was a little bit disturbed when I saw Donald Trump put Huawei back on. He followed the Australian example, and then he started to seem to go soft on it a little bit. So this is a place where I think the Australians have to tell the Americans to be tough.
Mike Doran, I love your idea that Australia is the outsider. I like it. It's catchy. There's something about it I really like. Mike Doran, so good to have you on the show again, and we'll catch up soon. Thanks, mate.
Thank you.